Right guys, welcome to lesson 3. So halfway through our task 1 academic band 7 challenge, and let's look at what we've been doing this week. So on Monday we looked at how to understand the task. On Tuesday, yesterday, we looked at how to structure a task 1 report and a little bit about paraphrasing, and I gave you feedback on your paraphrasing. So I looked at a number of the paraphrases that you posted under the video yesterday, which was great, and I made a separate feedback video, so it's in the group here. So if you just look in the group, you'll find the separate feedback video there for it. Today we're going to look at how to write a clear overview. Tomorrow we're going to write how to look at effective details paragraphs, and then finally we're going to finish up with vocabulary and grammar. So what are we going to do in this lesson? So we're going to do a little bit of review and feedback on yesterday. We're going to look at how to write a clear overview, of course. We're going to focus on line graphs, and we're going to give you a third task for you to complete. One thing that I've noticed is there are nearly 12,000 people in this group, and only about 500 of you do the tasks. Now, I'm not your father, you're not children, I'm not going to tell you what to do. It's totally up to you whether you want to do those tasks or not. However, what I will say is over the years we have dealt with thousands of successful students, and we've also dealt with many students who are unsuccessful. And the biggest differentiating factor between students who are successful and students who are unsuccessful is very simple. Successful students do the work. All right. Unsuccessful students, they might look at lots and lots of blog posts and YouTube videos and all of those different things, but until you actually do the work, until you put pen to paper or put your fingers on the keyboard and start doing something, you're never going to learn anything. So it might be a good idea to do the tasks. Okay, so paraphrasing, we looked at this yesterday. Let's review this very briefly. So this simply means restating the sentence so that it means the same thing but with different words. Another way to say this is saying it again but in your own words. And there are many different ways to paraphrase, but for task 1, synonyms are the easiest way to do this. And as I've just stated already in this video, go and look at the separate video I made last night, all about the feedback. So I took, I think, about 10 samples that could do with a little bit of improvement, and I talked about the key mistakes that people were making. So definitely check that out, because 90% of you made at least one key mistake. And this was a sample from a student which I thought was really good. So here's the question. The line graph below shows the number of serious crimes that occurred in London between 2003 and 2012. The chart displays the number of major crimes committed in London from 2003 to 2012. So why is this good? Number one, it means exactly the same as this. So the key thing for paraphrasing is the meaning cannot change. Number two, there are no grammatical or vocabulary errors. And number three, it's extremely clear and easy to understand. So those are the things you should be looking for. Some of the feedback that I got last night was, why did you pick this one? It's so simple. That's what you should be going for, guys. You should be going for things that are actually correct. A number of you were giving feedback to people and saying like, oh, your paraphrase is wonderful, I wish I could write like you. And the one that you were saying that about was full of mistakes. It's a real misconception that you need to use really highly complex language in order to get a high score. If I was examining and I was looking at this, I'd be very happy with this, because it's easy to understand, it means the same thing, and it shows that this person can change things around and use synonyms. They've repeated some words. For example, London. London is London, 2003 is 2003, 2012 is 2012, and there are some ways that you could change that, but overall it's a very good paraphrase. And we also looked at structure yesterday. So we looked at the introduction yesterday. Today we're going to look at the overview. So just in case you didn't watch the video for some reason yesterday, if you haven't, go back and watch it, because it's really important. But we also mentioned that for the overview, it doesn't matter where you put it You can put it after the introduction, or you can put it after the details paragraphs. It doesn't really matter. So what we're going to look at in the rest of this video is how to write a clear overview. So overviews. The overview is the most important paragraph in your whole Task 1 report. I would argue it's the most important paragraph. It's the most important part of your entire writing test. Why do I think that? Because I've had many conversations with senior Ielts examiners, and I've asked them that question. And the majority of them come back and say the most important thing is how to write a good overview, because if you do not know how to write a good overview, you're automatically going to be, lowering your score. And it's very difficult, if not impossible, to get over a 7 if you don't know how to write a clear overview. So in many cases, it will be the key factor that determines whether you get a 7 or above on your whole writing test. But this is not your fault, all right? This is not your fault because there is a huge amount of bad advice out there about how to write a clear overview, and it's an area that is not taught very well. There's a lot of poor advice out there. So the poor advice that I see is, do you know what this is? So this is an idiom, a cookie cutter method, or something that is cookie cutter. Overviews cannot be learned using cookie cutter methods. So a cookie cutter method is a method that you apply to every single situation. It doesn't change, and you just use the same thing over and over and over again. You cannot use that for Task 1 academic because the data is going to change all the time, and because there are so many different types of question. So if you try and use a cookie cutter, it's kind of like, those toys that children play with. It's trying to put a square shape into a circle hole, or trying to put a triangle shape into a square hole. It just will not. You need more flexibility. It just won't work. So here's some of the cookie cutter advice that I see from a lot of teachers and a lot of websites. They tell people to look for the highest, the lowest, the biggest, the smallest, the biggest differences, the peaks, the highs, the lows, something interesting, something significant, and key features. So if you give people this, it's telling them to look for everything and nothing all at the same time. It doesn't matter what data set you get or what data you get. You'll always be able to find the highest and the lowest and the biggest and the smallest and the peaks and the highs, and you'll always be able to find something interesting and something significant. But does that mean that they are the actual key features that you include in your overview? No. So this is doing more harm than it is good. By telling people to look out for these things, you don't really show them how to find key features because they're not thinking for themselves. They're applying these cookie cutter methods to something that actually requires you to think. Task 1 academic is as much a thinking task as it is a writing task. You have to understand what you're looking at. That's why we spent the whole first day just understanding the task, and we have to do that also with the overview. And that's understanding the task is a huge part of writing the overview, because if you understand it, you'll be able to pick out the key features. So each chart, graph, map, diagram is unique. Treating them all the same is the biggest mistake that you make. So stop thinking in that way. Stop trying to hack and shortcut and cookie cutter your way to getting the score you need. If that worked, everybody would get a 7 or above. The average score worldwide for writing is about 5.5, and I'd say it's even lower for Task 1. However, if you understand a few crucial things about each type of question, picking out the key features becomes much easier. So again, it's doing it on a question type by question type basis. So the overviews, the things you're going to be looking for, are going to be very different for a line graph compared to a bar chart. It's going to be very different again for a pie chart. It's going to be different again for a table. It's going to be different again for a map or a process diagram. So what we're going to look at in this video, in this lesson, we're going to focus on line graphs. Again, we can't cover all of the different types of questions because this course would turn into a 36-hour course or something like that. What we're going to do is I'm going to demonstrate to you how easy it is to pick out key features for line graphs, and then that will, change your mindset a little bit about this and show you by studying the other types of graphs, either by yourself for free at home or getting my help with it. it's just much more straightforward and much easier to do it in this way. So here's the line graph. If you have a fuzzy internet connection and you're seeing this and it's not very clear, I'll post the images underneath the video. So I'll post them in the comments. So if you can't read them, don't worry, because I'll post the images and you'll be able to see them much clearer. But for most people, you should be able to see this. So we're going to focus on this one again, and then I'm going to give you a brand new line graph for your task at the end. So the most important thing that you should ask yourself is, what is the purpose of the line graph? Why did they make it? All right, so don't think of it as someone in Cambridge making Ielts questions. Think about, why would somebody make this graph? What are they trying to show? So what do they want to show? What is the purpose of this graph? And if you ask yourself these questions for even bar charts and pie charts and all of the different things, everything becomes much, much clearer when you think in this way. So let's look at this. What is the purpose of this graph? Is the purpose of this graph to show, this little change and this little change? No. The main purpose of this graph is to show how these three things changed over this course of time. So from 2003 to 2012, the purpose of this graph is to show change between these two time periods. This is what you're actually looking at. This is why they made this graph. So somebody who would make this graph would be, let's say, a police department, and they're trying to track the different types of crimes. So, or a newspaper, because they're trying to show the public how crimes have changed. So knowing the purpose of this graph, and this is going to become much, much clearer in a minute when I show you how to pick out key features, showing the purpose of this graph really helps you understand it and really helps you pick out the key features. So what is the purpose of the line graph? To show changes over time and to show how things changed from one time to the next. So you're going to see in a minute how key this is for picking out your key features, and the key features are going to be included in your overview. So do we need to go into detail? So let's look at this. So do we need to go into a lot of detail in our overview? So a lot of people will look at this graph and go, okay, it goes up here and then it goes down and then it goes up here and then it kind of stays the same. Okay, so for assault, it goes up and then it goes down and then it goes up and then it goes down and then it goes up. Okay, for murder, it goes up and down and then it stays the same and then goes up. So you're not going to be able to go into detail. Leave the detail, leave all of the small changes for line graphs for the details paragraphs. In your overview, what you're looking at is just the general change over time, the general trend. Okay, so you're looking at how things have changed from the start until the end. And don't worry about these small changes, because you're going to write about them in your details paragraphs. But for the purposes of the overview, for the purposes of the line graph, you are looking at how things have changed from here, 2003 to 2012. And it doesn't change for any line graph over time. So do we need to go into detail? No. That is what we use the details paragraphs for. We simply report the key features and we never include details. So do not include data, do not include too many details or anything like that in your overview. So what are the key features? So let's have a look at the key features. So we've thought about the purpose. So the purpose is to show change over time. So that's clear. We're not going to go into too much detail, and what we're looking for is the general trends over time. So what we do is, so we take each one at a time, and again, this is just for line graphs over time. So well, let's take armed robbery to begin with. So this is this green line here. So it starts off here, up here in 2003, and ends up down here in 2012. So what you're doing is you're just plotting a line from here down to here, okay? And what that is, it's a decrease. Okay, so starts off at just under 3,500, finishes up at about 1,500. So that's a decrease from 2012 from 2003 to 2012. Let's start off with take assault. So it's at about 2,250. We don't need to worry about data at this moment. We're just I'm just telling you that to make it clear what we're doing, and then it ends up in 2012 at about 2,750. So what is that? If we plot a line from here up to here, that's an increase. Okay, So it does go up and down in the middle here, but we're not really worrying about what happens in the middle. What we're just worried about is what happens from one end to the other. So for this one, murder, so it starts off at about 500 and ends up at about 500. So it does, fluctuate a little bit here, but it doesn't really go up that much. Well, considering it's murder, probably does. You don't want too many murders. Well, big city like London, 1,000, yeah, that's a lot of murders actually. But if we look here, it starts off here, it starts off there. So what happens is it remains relatively unchanged. All right, an argument could be made that it does fluctuate. You could say that. In this case, both would be correct, I think. But what I'm going to say is it's going to remain relatively unchanged. So what are the key features? Report what happens from the start until the end, and this could be either, and this is how simple it is. All right. When a lot of my students start to work with me one-on-one, and we look at this, then the number one thing they say is, I can't believe how complicated I thought it was, and I can't believe how simple it actually is. Ielts is not a trick. They're not trying to purposely make you fail or anything. The thing is that people overcomplicate everything. And when you see how easy they actually make it for you, you're like, oh, I can't believe I failed this test so many times. And it wasn't because the questions were difficult. It's just that you thought that they were difficult. So for line graphs over time, it's either going to be an increase, it's going to be a decrease, it's going to remain unchanged, or it's going to fluctuate. Okay? Remember that this is only for line graphs, and you can also, you can add some things here. You could say it increased slightly or dramatically or sharply or, relatively unchanged or fluctuates wildly or fluctuates, whatever you want to say there. We're going to look at vocabulary on Friday. But that's the only things that you are looking for when it comes to line graphs over time. So let's pick out our key features. So this one, decrease, this one, increase, this one, relatively unchanged. So armed robbery decreased, assault increased, murder remained relatively unchanged. So let's write a clear overview. Start with overall, include 2 to 4 key features. So depending on the data, sometimes it will be 2 things, sometimes it will be 3 things, sometimes it will be 4 things, but it shouldn't be 1 and it shouldn't be more than 4. So between 2 and 4. Make the language extremely clear. Make sure that it is accurate and do not include any data. So armed robbery decreased, assault increased, murder remained unchanged. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this and we're going to put it into an overview. So here we are. Overall, the number of armed robberies decreased sharply. Assaults increased slightly and homicides remained relatively unchanged across the entire recorded period. Now, are you going to copy this? No, you're not going to copy this. It's going to be different for each data set. It's going to be different for each line graph. But let's look at what I've done here. The number of. So some of you would put overall armed robberies decreased or overall homicides decreased. So we're talking about the number of homicides. We're talking about the number of assaults. I've changed armed robbery to armed robberies. I've changed this to a plural. And it decreased sharply. All right, so I've added sharply because that is true. Assaults increased, so I've added an S on the end of it to show that it's plural. Increased slightly, so it did just increase slightly, or you could say increase steadily. And homicides remained relatively unchanged, so there was a little bit of an increase and there was a little bit of a decrease. We'll look at that in the details paragraphs, but overall, remember we're talking about overall, it remained relatively unchanged. And I'm talking about the entire recorded period, which is basically saying from 2003 to 2012 across the entire period. Okay, so what is good about that? What is good about that? So it is clear, it is easy to understand, and it is accurate. Okay, and it includes the 3 key features. All right, that's where you should be aiming for. That you pick out the key features and that you include them clearly and accurately. And if you do that, you'll have no problem with your overview and you will be way, way ahead of everybody else in the exam room, because believe me, most people do not know how to do this. So here is another line graph for you, and I want you to write a clear overview for this line graph, and I want you to post it below this video. I'm going to post the picture, the image, below the video also, because some people don't have very fast internet connections. Okay, so here it is. Let me read this to you. Western Europe, USA, China, 1870, 1913, 1950, 1973, 2003. And across here we have minus 1,000, 0, all the way up to 11,000. And here we have price of corn. All right, so it's just showing the price of corn. All right, I haven't included the top bit where it shows the question or the units of measurement or anything like that. All I want you to focus on are the key features and trying to report them as accurately and as clearly as possible. So only post below this video. Pretty simple. Do not demand that I look at yours. I had a number of people emailing me yesterday and sending me nasty messages saying, why don't you look at mine? Guys, there's 10,000, over 10,000 of you. I look at them randomly. I do as many as I can. Please realize I'm only one person teaching 12,000 people. And keep it simple, guys. Just focus on clearly reporting the key features in a clear overview. Thank you very much, guys, and I'll see you tomorrow for lesson 4. Thank you. Bye-bye.